गंगे च यमुने चैव गोदावरी सरस्वती कावेरी नर्मदे सिंधु जलस्मिन् सन्निधिं कुरु। जल ईश्वर स्वरूप है, सौम्य, शालीन, जीवनदायक। प्रकृति का दिया ये जल रूपी वरदान पृथ्वीवासियों के लिए सिर्फ एक विरासत नहीं, बल्कि एक जिम्मेदारी है, जिसे आने वाली पीढ़ी के लिए संभालना आवश्यक है। और इस उद्देश्य की ओर पूरी निष्ठा से कार्य कर रहा है राष्ट्रीय जल मिशन, जल शक्ति मंत्रालय, भारत सरकार।
खेती के उपयोग में आने वाले पानी का अधिकतम उपयोग हो, इस दृष्टिकोण से मंत्रालय माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के मार्गदर्शन में काम कर रहा है और हमने नेशनल वाटर मिशन में 20% तक पानी के उपयोग में कमी लाने का लक्ष्य रखा है। सतह पर जो जल उपलब्ध है उसका उचित प्रबंधन, भूगर्भ के जो हमारे स्रोत हैं उनका ठीक से उपभोग हो, जो पानी हम अलग अलग क्षेत्र में उपयोग में लेते हैं उसका विवेकपूर्ण उपयोग हो, और उसके साथ साथ में जो पानी उपयोग के बाद में निकलता है उसका ठीक से ट्रीटमेंट हो, तो हम जल सुरक्षित देश को बना सकते हैं।
जलवायु परिवर्तन का विशेष ध्यान रखते हुए नेशनल एक्शन प्लान ऑन क्लाइमेट चेंज के तहत नेशनल वाटर मिशन की स्थापना की गई, ताकि जल संरक्षण को बढ़ावा मिले, जल की बर्बादी को कम किया जा सके और राज्यों के भीतर एवं राज्यों के बीच जल का अधिक समान रूप से वितरण सुनिश्चित किया जा सके।
Very good afternoon, everyone, and warm welcome to 40th Water Talk, being organized by National Water Mission, Ministry of Jal Shakti, and is supported by Water Digest. I'm Anupma, the director and editor of Water Digest, and we take pride to be a part of this wonderful initiative of National Water Mission. India is known for its rich culture and having ages-old traditional water conservation practices. Whether we talk about whether we talk about Bandi, we talk about Bawari, Johars, many more name. However, one important purpose of conserving water. And water conservation is the key element of any strategy to deal with water stressed or water scarce situation. Today, there is with changing climatic conditions and different rainfall pattern, even government side is taking a lot of initiative, or government is putting a lot of impetus on conserving water through traditional water conservation practices. These practices are not only eco-friendly, but are well managed by the local knowledge. They are supported by the local knowledge. And considering all these points in mind, we have with us a wonderful speaker today, Mr. A. Mridul, who will be talking about contemporizing traditional water architecture, restoration, iteration, and mainstreaming. Before I introduce more about our speaker today, I would like to invite Honorable Shri Devashri Mukherjee Ma'am, Additional Secretary and Mission Director, National Water Mission, Ministry of Jal Shakti, for her opening address. Over to you, Devashri Ma'am.
Very much, Anupama ji. Good afternoon to everybody. Namaskar, Mr. Mridul.
Thank you.
As this is the 40th edition of our Water Talks, we are inching towards the half century, and it gives me great pleasure to be cognizant of this fact. I think everybody here, everybody who's joined us here today, everybody who will listen to this talk, is aware that water is one of our biggest challenges in the world. Water management, and particularly in the context of climate change, we are already seeing it happen. We are seeing extreme precipitation events. We are seeing longer dry spells, which are affecting our food security. So water management has been and is going to be even more important in the times to come. So, and water management cannot be done effectively by government. It cannot be done by the state. It needs everybody to come together, so that, because water is a common resource, it is owned by everybody. It is not equitably available, but it needs a number of actors to involve, as we always say that water is everybody's business. To in the area of water conservation and management, the water talks are an effort to bring in people, practitioners, who will answer the how. We know what needs to be done, but the question is how. And so it gives me great pleasure to welcome Mr. Mridul today. And Mr. Mridul, in his talk, in his presentation, will bring together two very, very interesting areas of work. One is about the constant effort, which is about bringing water center stage in urban planning, design, as well as urban development. I mean, it has been my experience that frequently there are new settlements coming up without looking at a clear water source. Recipe for disaster. So how can water and water management be center of urban planning, development, and the entire policy regime? And the second is heritage management. So Mr. Mridul is marrying these both things, and I think I will stop now and request him to start his presentation because we are all very eager to hear him. Thank you.
Thank you, Debashri ma'am. And before I invite Mridul ji for his talk, I would like to give a quick background about Mr. Mridul, an internationally awarded architect who had been working on diverse projects in India and US, an alumnus of Chhattisgarh College of Architecture, and his architectural consultation practice, A. Mridul Architect, was established in 1985. So almost 40 years, almost 40 years. Also, Mr. Mridul is passionate about the ancient water heritage of India. He believes and practices the idea of making India water positive by contemporizing the traditional water heritage through its regeneration, replication, and mainstreaming. He has also been awarded and affiliated by various, he has been affiliated like member, Council of Architecture, Associate, the Indian Institute of Architects, Chairman, Rupayan Sansthan Jodhpur, and many more. He has also been awarded as 2 Asia Architecture Award 2016 at Vienna, Austria, Foodco Design Award, and many more. The list goes on. And I think now we would like to hear from him about his work and his vision about reviving and contributing towards water conservation. Over to you, Mridulji.
Thank you. I'll start with sharing my screen.
Please.
So is my screen visible and I'm audible?
Yes. Yes, Mridulji.
Okay, good. Thank you for the introductions, Anupmaji. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks to the National Water Mission and Mrs. Debashri Mukherjee ma'am for inviting me to deliver a keynote on topic that requires immediate and urgent attention. I think it'll be better if I switch off my camera. Yeah. It is indeed an honor for me to be included in a list of illustrious speakers. There have been about 39 before me, and I don't know how many there will be after me. It's a great honor. My talk addresses the relationship between water and communities and the architecture that connects the two intimately together, each sustaining the other, and how the breakdown of this relationship has resulted in causing the deep water crisis that we are faced with. To my reckoning, it is a man-made crisis, an issue more of management rather than availability of fresh water. Earth has no dearth of water, has over 325 million trillion gallons of water These are facts you all must be knowing. You've been hearing these talks. 97% of it is saline and not fit for consumption. Only 3% is fresh water, of which over 2% is trapped in ice, and only 1% is available in liquid form for consumption. Most of this fresh water is underground, not easy to access, but whatever is available is enough for us. Like what Mahatma Gandhi said, enough for our needs, but not for our greed, provided we manage water efficiently and use it judiciously. It just needs to be valued and respected. Unfortunately, over the last 1 century, that is what we have lost, our reverence for water. And that is what has plunged us into deep water crisis. But one thing is for sure, all the water that Earth holds is not going anywhere, nor getting reduced in quantity. It may evaporate, freeze in ice, sink in earth, may also get polluted, and it is often not easily accessible, but it is not disappearing anyway. So we need not despair or panic. We just need to put our house in order. Historically, water, the architecture to secure water and communities, were such an interwoven entity that none could be seen in isolation. This picture is of a very primitive rock cut stepwell in Rajasthan, a very, very basic construct, carving out steps in walls by cutting and shaping rock. Water commanded such importance even in the prehistoric era that the technological focus of the time was in producing sophisticated freshwater sourcing, conveying, and storing systems. Sorry. Historically, you have these lovely historic buildings. It was in devising methods to harness, transport, and build basins to collect fresh water that water architecture was born. To the simple utilitarian form of rock cut, man brought his finest ingenuity to create exquisite aqua architecture. It was the architecture that was designed around water that made the entire water heritage rich, engaging, and sustainable. It was especially in the urban areas that exquisite aquastructures of the Indian antiquity were built as ecosystems to access subterranean water or to harvest water. Water, man brought the best of his skills as offering in worship by constructing water buildings as temples to water, replete with intricate carvings and, as you can see, sculptures in walls, creating a unique iconography. And simultaneously, these buildings would serve as socio-cultural spaces. But somewhere in the last 1 century, the connect between water, man, and architecture has fragmented, and each has taken a toll. If we reestablish our relationship with water and treat it like God and water containments like temple, like our forebears did, we will rarely ever stress for water. It is in this kind of divine relationship that with water that lessons of freshwater management are embedded. I think our forebears understood environment better than we do, and that is why we should keep referencing to their wisdom to take cues for solutions for the mess we are in today. On my part, this session on water today is one such attempt. To emerge out of the water crisis, we need to understand how our ancestors harnessed and conserved water and how we can innovate upon their legacy. I would like to share my understanding of how a renaissance of traditional architecture and its iteration can help mitigate the deepening water crisis. The picture on the left is an inscribed stone pillar. This is often you'll find it installed near indigenous water bodies. It is the most sacred symbol and the identity of historic water bodies, at least in Rajasthan and Gujarat. And it signifies the piousness that people associated with water. In fact, if you see this pillar somewhere, then you make sure that you have to take off your footwear and then go into the water body or near the water body. It has sculptures of deity, which inculcates in the community an idea of sacredness to alert people that they are in a pious zone where they must exercise the deepest reverence. Over the last century, with the advent of mechanized water supply, our indigenous water bodies have got pushed into oblivion, and these sacred pillars have become obscure. You hardly notice them these days. So, this talk is also about the efforts at securing the honor of such sacred pillars. The ensuing presentation has been divided broadly in 3 parts. The first is briefly about the state and status of urban water heritage. The second part is about contemporizing the water heritage by way of regeneration of traditional water architecture and bringing it back to the mainstream. The third and final section is about contemporization by way of iteration, replication, and mainstreaming, exemplified by some ideas about catching the rain where it falls and when it falls, supported by some proposals for augmenting the water bank, and further exemplified by a newly constructed rainwater harvesting building, a 21st century step well, Birkha Bawri in Jodhpur. Before I begin, I would like to retell a folk story, a story which has parallels in many cultures the world over. A folk story that exemplifies our misdirected quest for resolution of the water crisis. There is this old woman who's looking for a key under a lamppost in front of her hut. People passing by start helping her, and when after a long time they don't find the key, one of them asks her, "Do you know where exactly you dropped the key?" She says, "Well, outside the door of my house." The people helping her, surprised, ask her, "Then why are you looking for it here across the road?" She says, "I can't look where I dropped it because it is pitch dark there. So I'm looking for it under this lamppost where there is ample light." This folk story is the leitmotif of this talk, the essence of this discourse. This section is not just about the historic context of water bodies. It will tell about brief history, origin, typology, and the journey from being sustainable to going into a state of suspension. To best exemplify the water heritage, I will confine myself to the desert region of Rajasthan, and more particularly to the urban water heritage of the desert city of Jodhpur, as a microcosm of the entire country, as a case in point that can be expanded to apply for major parts of India. It is an ideal case as it offers the worst case scenario in terms of extremities of climate, hot and arid, and having the lowest rainfall in the country, and yet the best case scenario in terms of creation of a rich water heritage in face of the most adversarial climatic conditions. This will help in understanding the causes and possible resolutions of the water stress of the country. You can see the cursor. So Jodhpur is located on a small outcrop of the Aravalli Hill Range on the edge of the Thar Desert, in the rain shadow of the Aravalli Hills. Temperatures soaring up to 48 degrees, rainfall less than 300 mm, and even, and sometimes much, much less than that. A barren land with no source of water, no perennial river. Zooming in on this outcrop shows the site of Jodhpur, the seat of the kingdom. This is where the Mehrangarh fort is. It was founded in the year 1459 on the highest peak of the ridge. This ridge is about 400 feet above the plain. There were two principal determinants for the site selection: defense and the potential for collecting water. The ridge was at the edge of a craggy expanse of hills on the northwest side and a long, narrow expanse of plains on the southeast. They were so bright, these guys, they're so astute. The craggy, undulating side offered deep troughs that became natural lakes and ponds for rainwater to collect. The town was developed on the foothills and plains. To the plains, water was conveyed through gravity into the tanks through aquifers and into the wells. So this is the higher portion, this is the lower portion, where the town came up ultimately. The ancestors used the astute ingenuity to harvest however much rainwater that fell on the land. A robust network of natural and man-made water bodies was created to collect as much water as possible to last for as long as possible. At the end of 15th century, it was a very small settlement. Just a few natural water sources were developed, and very few man-made wells and step wells were built within the settlement that had come up. All the water bodies present today were built gradually over centuries, kept expanding with expanding spread of town and increasing population. The key was, and unfortunately we've lost the key, creation of water network was almost always a work in progress. So, every few years they would, as the population would increase, as the town would spread, they would keep adding more and more water bodies. And by the end of 19th century, almost all the local bodies as they are today were in place. It was in creating basins to harness rainwater that our ancestors were great experts at, and they were used. I mean, I would say they were brilliant. The city has a diverse portfolio of water bodies to divert and capture every drop from the sky, from collection into these natural lakes or lakes which have been embanked on one side, otherwise it's open. Otherwise it's kind of a valley from three sides. So the natural water would come and get collected here. It is stored here, and it can be, you know, access from here, but very limited access. From here, it would be taken into the city where they would have large tanks to store water closer to the consumers. From there, it, uh, it would leak from the pervious base of both the lakes and the tanks. It would leak into the aquifers, go to wells, and the wells would be of various kinds. And a more personalized way of looking at it is that there would be tankas. Like this is the fort, and there's a huge courtyard. There's a tanka under this. So all the water from the terrace would come and get collected here. And the surplus water from the city, the rainwater from the city, would flow into a seasonal river going and connecting to villages. The entire network was robust, self-reliant, efficiently managed, even without any perennial river, from macro to micro, simple to ornate. Ironically, saving for a rainy day, a phrase whose literal and figurative meanings are strikingly opposite in this context. This is one of the primary water bodies, a natural lake, just at the base of the fort, the home and seat of the rulers. It's a large lake carved out of rocks to collect runoff and is the oldest. The larger surface bodies, the natural lakes, were under the control of the state. The royal buildings essentially stood sentinel on the primary water bodies, keeping the principal collection and supply under their control. On its embankment, it has a very well proportioned set of steps cascading down to access water at varying levels. Religious rites of the royal families were also performed here. The rites which would be directly connected to water, which would start from birth to marriage and even death rituals. A Persian wheel was mounted on the stone brackets. The water would be drawn from the lake and supplied to the fort. Next in the hierarchy were large tanks built as secondary or intermediary water bodies to store water channelized from the natural lakes. These were set in midst of the dense settlement, but had their operation and maintenance under state control, but were yet open to public. And the water bodies like this tank, Grab Sagar, were in just, they were not just water containments. These were created as environmental and community buildings. Embedded in dense settlement, these water buildings provided respite from heat and dryness, transforming the ecology and microenvironment, making the place more livable. The connect between communities and water was direct and intimate. It manifested in making the water and water bodies celebratory and worship worthy. The cultural perspectives around these sacred water structures were sewn into the daily life of people as social and religious rituals, in a sense, as a hedge against their desecration. Then there were these underground water bodies, very simple wells. They dotted the city. Unlike the lakes and tanks, these subterranean water bodies may be termed as tertiary water bodies. They were there for access and for public, for direct use. Facilitating water was considered as an act of religious merit. So majority of the wells were built by philanthropists and many by women. A well in the city chalk would often be covered with beautiful buildings and have a tree and a raised platform to sit and gather and catch up when women would come to fetch water. The well-to-do would often have wells within their premises, and many temples and mosques would have wells that were considered holy, used for offerings and rituals. A square step well or jhalara, in the local dialect, is a more evolved variant of a well. These small and compact water buildings were located on the routes leading to the walled city or in smaller neighborhoods. The water bodies that were principally built to harness water from the sky and earth evolved as exquisite buildings that also served as social and community buildings and created a rich heritage of water architecture. An exquisite variant of well, which was called Bawdi, a step well, embedded in multiple neighborhoods, were the more intimate socio-cultural buildings, especially for women, as fetching water fell in their domain. The underground pavilions and chambers in the flanking walls provided space to women to gather for social interaction in the cool privacy, away from the gaze of men and scorching sun. For a few women, this was the only outing they had amid daily chores and domestic responsibilities. These draw wells and the variants were built on roadsides, inside temples, mosques, even private houses. So on this Google picture are marked some of the many wells along one street that we have shown here, charged with water flowing downstream from the picture of the lake Ranisa that I showed to you. The wells in the city were so numerous and so located that they were within walking distance of houses, making water easily accessible to the households. The entire gamut of water bodies were interconnected with canals and nalas, conveying water from the largest to the smallest. There was a network of over 85 kilometers of canals tying the hundreds of water bodies of the historic city. The entire water network was robust and was even without any perennial river and with low rainfall, Jodhpur remained water positive for centuries, barring some exceptional times during extended periods of drought. But the irony is that, like in most of India, Rajasthan, Jodhpur, all these places, despite having a great wealth of ancient water structures, today stand water impoverished. And one of the major reasons is that we have completely abandoned our local on site water sources, which would have served as reserves in the scheme of the modern mega water infrastructure. In fact, many parts of India, if preserved, these would have continued to be the principal sources of water. So, this huge repertoire of traditional water bodies managed by communities with a participatory and democratic approach was relegated in favor of a centralized state controlled modern water infrastructure, which, as a solely independent dispensation, has proven to be dismally insufficient in meeting the fresh water requirement of a growing population. Paradoxically, the advancement of water technology, aiding water being sourced from off site locations or remotely located rivers, instead of complementing, they completely replaced the indigenous water systems, which with time resulted in impoverishing the state in fresh water. Post independence, the historic water buildings were appropriated by the state without accountability. Earlier, they were with the communities. This resulted in a breakdown of the connect between communities and their most revered resource. Communities are clueless, and the state is too caught up with tackling the constant challenge posed by the mega infrastructure. The work in progress, which was kind of a mantra that sustained the indigenous water network, was halted. There are these three C's, C as in alphabet, which have pushed these water buildings into dormancy and oblivion. Every component of the traditional water network has been ravaged. The first C is the callousness on part of the state, with which these lovely water bodies have been abandoned and are now in a shambles, defunct and forgotten. The second C is the state's complacence when these were desecrated and encroached upon. Treated as dump yards, many of these got appropriated while the government looked away. And the third C is government's complicity, I'm sorry, but that's true, in the destruction process by allotting mining leases in the catchment areas. Many of the catchments have been given away without a policy for conserving the natural water drains, and they are now destroyed beyond salvage. This is one of the historic boundaries. What were once temples to water have become tombs of water, literally and figuratively. And the irony is that, like in so many other regions in the world, Jodhpur, despite having this great wealth, is today water deficient. So we have our own sources, but we are now relying on remote sources, which is not sufficient. This kind of plays out the folk story I related in the beginning of this presentation. The unfortunate water story of Jodhpur exemplifies what is happening to the ancient water heritage of the entire country. 54% of India faces high water stress. Over 54% of subsoil water is plummeting in Neetha, deeper than 100 meters. Over 100 million people do not have access to good quality water. Groundwater extraction in India is the highest in the world, most of it with state complicity, without any effort to recharge, taking a toll on the quality and quantity of underground water. The water scarcity has sparked a scramble for water in even the regions which fall in the sufficient and high rainfall zones. and the situation is not very different elsewhere. This portends a trend that is likely to become common in India if not taken care of in time, which we can do. Presently, the strife is only increasing. Interstate water disputes and hydropolitics are already the new terms in currency. These two juxtaposed maps bring out the stark dichotomy of state of water in India. These are two maps of India which give contradictory information about fresh water, yet both are right from their respective standpoints. The rainfall map shows that India receives close to 1100 mm of average annual precipitation, less than a third of which is enough to support the needs of at least the apparent needs of an ever increasing population. Yet the second map tells us that close to two-thirds of India faces high to extremely high water stress. This doesn't quite add up. Why is it that a country which has had a rich heritage of water is thirsting for water? Clearly, it is not a problem due to scarcity of water. The total precipitation in India provides far more than the demand. The problem is due to lack of efficient management. Amidst the growing challenge of meeting the deepening water crisis, it has now become vital that the ancient wisdom of harnessing water is revisited and contemporized by restructuring the traditional ones, creating new ones, rationalizing the modern, and finally integrating the entire gamut of water structure to build a diverse portfolio of water network. What needs to be recognized also is that in devising a new water management approach, neither the indigenous water harvesting practices nor the centralized modern infrastructure can suffice as a sole source, and that both the on-site and off-site sources have to complement each other to obtain a sustainable water network. And even though the antique water buildings of India have fallen into dilapidation due to neglect and forced dormancy, their extremely high resilience quotient makes them capable of regeneration even after a hiatus of over a century. And what more, their resilience value is not only in their ability of regenerating, but also in their being able to offer an informed validation for generating new ones. It is in this background that a template of regeneration, iteration, and mainstreaming of local water bodies has been evolved to perpetuate the heritage of water, carry on the tradition of building new ones with ever expanding cities and population, and get back into the mode of work in progress eternally. For over a year and a for over a 1.5 decade now, we have started putting into practice the idea of contemporizing the traditional water architecture by way of their reactivation. As a first, we have identified a huge number of ancient water bodies and are seeking support from philanthropists, community, and corporates to conserve and revive and mainstream them. The picture shows one of the many such efforts. This is a 16th century uh, step well, Navlakha Bawri. It lay abandoned for 5 to 6 decades, suffered great structural damage. Conservation work funded by Hinduja Foundation was initiated last year. Starting with documentation, we took up restoration of the structure, cleaning the water, and shall soon have it mainstreamed to the city infrastructure. This is one of the largest and oldest step wells, Tapi Bawri, embedded in the dense neighborhood of the walled city. The structure is deeply weathered. Many stone components have eroded. It was shocking to find that a new structure, some bathrooms, were built on one of the pavilions. With the help of Honorable Minister Mr. Shekhawat and some of his friends, last month we have started making the damage assessment report. They're funding this. Some of his friends are funding this and have simultaneously started emergency repairs. The one good thing about this Bawi is that despite its dismal state, it has a deep connect with the community of the Mohalla. Every year, people celebrate Kartik Purnima by lighting it up with hundreds of diyas. So, what is good about it is that post its restoration, the community will have a more intimate connect and will ensure its upkeep, security, and sustenance. This is a step well Jadeji Chalra, which was built in 1718. Yet another example of what the kind of work we are doing. This is something which the others we have started. This is something we've done. There was heavy vegetation growth with deep roots in the structure. There were large cracks in the masonry structure. The water was dirty. And most of the time it was used as a dump yard. Its restoration work funded by Innovil Club of Jodhpur and Mehrangarh Museum Trust was completed in 2019. The picture on the left shows it fraught with deep vegetation growth and structural damage. On the right is its picture after this was conserved, restored, and mainstreamed to the city network. Revived and returned to the community, these historic water buildings are becoming active socio-cultural spaces that would ensure their sustainability and upkeep. Their successful regeneration clearly proves that even after being in dormancy for over a century and being in a state of grave dilapidation, they still have potential to bounce back to life as water sources and community spaces. Another important component of the water heritage and network of the city were its rainwater drains. Overflow from catchments and streets of the town would flow through these drains and connect to the seasonal river. Almost all the traditional rainwater drains that flowed the natural gradient have their courses disturbed due to a spate of new colonies built across the natural slopes. So another initiative in revival of traditional water system is in realigning the drains by finding appropriate diversions and by reconnecting to the seasonal river, and in the process make them part of the city's landscape. Depending upon the extent and volume, these can be repurposed as cities' landscape public spaces. This is our imagination of it. During non-monsoon months, these could serve as green corridors much needed in the city. And during rains, these could serve as drains, as blue corridors of the city, facilitating free flow of rainwater leading to the seasonal river. Building recharge wells in these drains will also help filling up the aquifers and raising the water table of the sub-ground water. And the third and final section is about contemporization by way of iteration and mainstreaming, exemplified by some ideas about catching the rain where it falls and when it falls. As I said, supported by some proposals and some ideas that we have, and something that we have actually realized, one new step well, 21st century step well Birkhabawi. So the idea of iteration involves two-pronged strategy. Prior to the new settlements developing outside the old walled city, there were areas of low depression in the plains where the excess rainwater from the walled city would flow and get collected as seasonal ponds. Some of these sites in Jodhpur have been identified on this Google map, the blue dots that you see. But the major problem has been that built development has been promoted in these sites without regard to the natural flow and course of water. Large colonies have been built across the natural courses of water and also in and around what used to be the seasonal plants lying in the low-lying area. This results in flooding and massive waterlogging. The first right to land belongs to water. When we as developers interfere with its natural flow line, we encroach upon the water's natural courses. We design disasters. Floods are not natural calamities. Floods are man-made calamities. And when floods wreak havoc, it is we who are both the culprits and the victims. Waterlogging and flooding in our cities have kind of become annual monsoon features. This fact, though unfortunate, is yet ironically hope-inducing. And I'll tell you why. The pluvial flooding clearly demonstrates that our towns and villages are still large active catchments, and there is a great potential for rebuilding the on-site water resources by harnessing the wasted rainwater from the local catchments. So this is an example that we are putting forth to the government. This is one way to tackle the problem of waterlogging and turn it to advantage is reverting to the tradition of creating surface water bodies to collect and contain the flood water. This is a Google image of one of the posh colonies of Jodhpur, built at the foothills of one of the hillocks. During rains, a large part of it gets waterlogged. It has been built across the natural flow. There is this large roundabout, and around this ellipse that you see, maximum water gets collected here, but water gets collected all around, and even in these, these larger campuses also. The colony has numerous open spaces. These are, all open spaces within colonies. These are mandated open spaces, which can be repurposed as new ponds and aquaparks to divert the flooding. So, even if one doesn't take up the entire park, we can devote part of the whole open land for these. So, like in old times, you used to have these water bodies embedded within the dense settlement. We could still do the same thing here. These neighborhood water bodies, if left unlined, can serve as recharge ponds also, and alternatively, if made impervious, recharge wells can be built within these ponds. Millions of liters of rainwater can be diverted in aquifers that have been drying up due to exploitative extraction. Often it is noticed that stormwater gets logged around roundabouts of the city roads. If these roundabouts are converted into recharge wells into which the stormwater can be diverted, it would be a great deed done. You've drawn a lot from the earth. This is an imagined view of one of the such proposed park, partly converted into a surface water body. With time, when aquifers get recharged, jhalras and step wells can be embedded in the neighborhoods around to divert water seeping into aquifers from these ponds. While these are surface, then you can have more subsurface bodies, as was the tradition at historic cities. This way, the rainwater can both be harnessed and harvested, making each of such neighborhoods water positive and self reliant. If the stormwater is collected in local neighborhood ponds, the pressure on stormwater drains and city infrastructure would reduce considerably, and the water that floods and flows on the roads gets curtailed, preventing road and soil erosion. In furtherance to the idea of iterating historic water architecture, we have prepared an important proposal, the execution on which shall be starting soon. This is a picture of one of the hillocks named Pachetia, on top of which the famed Jodhpur fort is perched. The local administration came up with the idea of developing part of the Pachetia hill, this steep part and some of the areas below this, as a heritage site to enhance tourism. It was while working on this proposal, we pushed the idea of developing this part as a cultural precinct. One of the principal proposals we presented was towards making the city water rich, enhancing the water bank. The water heritage and the idea of adding new water bodies with increasing population needs to be brought out of its hiatus. So we designed a cultural walk of about 1.5 kilometers in which we proposed inserting more water bodies in the precinct to capture rainwater from the contours. We have designed this 1.5-kilometer cultural walk and heritage walk in the city. You can see this blue line. So this is the cultural walk that we've designed. There are already about 8 small and slightly bigger water bodies of different types in this cultural walk. During a survey, we found there are 3 or 4 more potential sites for creating new water bodies on the descending slopes of the hills. Very, very subtly, we can put them in, and they won't stand out. This is one of the potential sites. It is in midst of a small neighborhood lying unused, often becomes a dump yard. There is some wild vegetation and some fully grown old trees. Just with a gentle clearing, a good site for a jhalra gets available, and we've taken care that the fully grown trees are not Xed. We have proposed inserting new jhalra step wells to both collect the water from catchment and possibly from aquifers too. We are studying the hydrology. This can cater to the neighborhood for water and also serve as community building. This picture is our imagination of when it would be filled with water. So till the water lasts, it can be used as a water source. And when the water level recedes, it becomes an amphitheater and a community space for the neighborhood. A lot of Sufi festivals and music festivals happen in Jodhpur, so this can become a good site. The last project is a new stepwell built in this century, and to my reckoning, a stepwell built after over a century of the last traditional stepwell constructed in India. Excuse me. The idea of iteration of the historic water architecture, concept of building and expanding on-site water buildings, has been successfully realized by the construction of Birkha Bawdi in a new housing township of Jodhpur. This project of ours is an initiative to restore the missing link between the ancient and the contemporary, reassuring the golden era water harvesting structures. Around 2004, a new housing township, Umeed Heritage, was initiated in Jodhpur. There is a small hillock, Ratnada, with the famed Umeed Bhavan Palace perched on top of it on its ridge. The site of the township is located on its foothills, a long, narrow stretch of about 2 kilometers. This is the image of the site when work had just been initiated. A barren landscape on a red sandstone hill, craggy and undulating. To make it an environmentally viable venture, it was imperative to create a dense green cover and ensure continuous supply of water for its sustenance. You can see it's so barren, there's not a single tree over there. And heat used to be oppressive because the hillock would reflect the heat. In a water scarce region with highly restricted state supplied water and forever dipping groundwater tables because of extraction, the the only salvation was in creating one's own source, in conserving rainwater by ancient wisdom. And that is how the idea of creating Rekha Bawri germinated. It's about 110 acres, the whole site area, designed for about 410 residential plots for a population of over 1600 once fully occupied. The master planning has been designed with a central core of green, starts from this end to goes all the way up to the other. And we have selected the lowermost portion on the site where we have located our Bawri. From the 7 landscape park, this is what we have chosen for the Bawri. A composite structure for the subterranean reservoir was created. We have, used kind of arcuated walls. So this is a Bawri, but unlike any other structure, this one is a new kind of a structure that we have. This massive subterranean structure is about 235 meters long, on an average 10.5 meters wide, and gradually descends 16 meters below ground. Each bay is about 14 meters long. There are 14 bays of varying widths and varying volumes, and the structure descends 5 stories below the ground. A network of stormwater drains converge on either side of the Bawri. Sluice walls on either side are closed so that the first and sometimes the second flush of rain carrying the muck and dirt is diverted away. Though traditionally the square Jhalra and linear Bawri are two separate types of step wells, Rekha Bawri has been designed as a combination of both. The Jhalra is set as forecourt of the Rekha Bawri, and the main body is longitudinal like the linear historic Bawris. However, Birkha Bawri is unique and completely different from the traditional Bawris in its structural form and system. Incidentally, Birkha in the local dialect means rain, and Bawri in the vernacular means stepped well. Hence, this has been named as Birkha Bawri. The construction of the step well becomes especially significant as it is built of locally available natural building material, built by local craftsmen to collect the natural resource of rainwater, harnessed by gravity, creating an eco-friendly structure celebrating both stone and water architecture. The ingress of water is gravity-driven, and the only time electricity is used is in drawing water. Since enough solar electricity is generated in the township, this Bawri is a near zero energy project. Considering the fact that the first major maintenance has been taken up in 2019 after a decade of its construction, it has proven negligible average annual cost for operation and maintenance. A quick tour of the completed project. This is the entrance to the Bawri. As contemporary as it is traditional, the forecourt in form of a jhalra occupies the foreground. Its magnificence starts revealing itself as one descends. The two-storied pavilion marks the transition between the step pond and the step well. As one gets closer, the tributed frames form a concentric view through the post and beam, offering a binocular view of the set of perforations for inlets at the far end, almost 235 meters away. Most of the stone used is rock-faced or rough-hewn, contrasting the rawness of stone with strict geometry. And in fact, in striking contrast with those beautiful water bodies that we saw in the beginning. The descent into the earth offers varying experiences of light and shadow through varying frames of beams and columns, but this can happen only when it is empty. The columnar frames that enclose the volume at the end of the arcuated walls hold pavilions at 2 levels. You can liken it to the traditional Bavis where we had pavilions at different levels. So this particular ocean, when you can come it, you'll be touching water level when the Bawri is at its fullest. So both these become both experiential spaces for the visitors. As you descend deeper, shadows deepen, outside noise muffles, and echoes amplify. The elements have retained the naturalness, the geometry choreographed through the design makes up for the intricate lattice work typical to the ancient water architecture. As one goes deeper into the earth, diverse shapes of sky is offered through each varying frame. While the beam and column frames silhouette the sky in a rectangle, the arcuated walls frame the sky in a parenthesis. And the final circular bay forms a telescopic view of the sky, kind of reaching out to it while simultaneously drawing the sun to light up its cavern. True to the tradition, the stepwell has been developed to serve as a public space also, with a meandering promenade, a loop of almost half a kilometer, with a park along its periphery. The Bowery is also a community space for people to gather and celebrate, contemporizing the socio-cultural ethos of the intimate connect that the community had with the vernacular water buildings. It has become a coveted venue for dance recitals. These water bodies can sustain only with deep community engagement. If left as isolated infrastructure buildings, they will fall into neglect. This is the picture shown earlier, the barren site at the time it was acquired, devoid of vegetation and water, essential to a conducive microenvironment of any settlement. The before and after pictures bear testimony to the environmental ecological transformation such projects can effect from barren to lush green. The transformation has also enhanced the commercial value of the project 8 to 10 times in just 10 years. The creation of this 21st century stepwell demonstrates that such indigenous water bodies are still viable architecturally and financially, and that it is possible to build and expand the water heritage of the country. No matter what the magnificence, scale, and heightened experiences, to promote and inspire creation of local neighborhood level water resources, it is imperative that constructions are cost effective, yet architecturally appealing enough to be able to enroll people's connect with water and its buildings. These architectural creations must give to the communities a sense of place with features of the environment that they can relate with the aesthetic, culture, and heritage values and facilities for social interaction. To expand the water heritage of India, it is essential that the government's mandate creation of on-site water bodies in existing and new neighborhoods. To mitigate the water crisis, India needs to foster an interaction between its natural and built capital, both ancient and modern, by adopting an inclusive approach in developing a sustainable water portfolio and make India water positive. Thank you. I can't hear you.
You're on mute.
Thank you, Mridulji, for wonderful presentation and sharing your work, and especially showing that there is tangible effect. One can see before after pictures and can certainly get motivated. So it's a trend that post the talk we generally have a question answer session so that our audience, the viewers, the participants can get the replies for their queries. So, ma'am, if you permit, shall we open it for the quick Q&A? Yeah, okay. So for all the participants who joined us from this particular platform or through Facebook, you can please write or post your queries, and you also have an option of raising your hand. Raise your hand, my team will unmute you and you can ask your queries. So now your chance to interact. So please ask your queries. So I've already
Request,
received two.
Mr. Jatin, you may please ask your query. I request again, Mr. Jatin. Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, I hope I'm audible. Hello. Okay.
Yes, you are. Please go ahead. Go
Okay.
ahead.
So, first of all, thank you for organizing this event. It was quite insightful. As Mr. Mridul said, like the problem is in the efficiency, the architectural efficiency, right? So, um, I'm also working upon kind of same problem. And though I have a technology water tech startup based in Germany, and I'm tackling the efficiency problem of water in the urban cities. So, may I know, does the like NWA has a sort of data set that we could utilize in our research in terms of like the how
Jatin, I would like to intervene here. If you want to, connect for any of your work wherein you need some support, you may please separately write an email, and we'll try so we can support that. So this particular forum, I request if there are any queries, you may please directly address the queries to the speaker if it is pertaining to today's water talk.
okay. Thank you. I'll
Yeah.
connect later.
Thank you. Mridulji, we have received a question already which says, which is like, do you think you've been talking about catch the rain where it falls, when it falls? That means giving a lot of importance to rainwater. So the question is, do you think harvesting rainwater is the most reliable source of water conservation for water bodies in India?
Yes, it is because, am I audible? Okay. So, I mean, it always has been for centuries and it continues to be. Unfortunately, we let the rainwater fritter away. And what we are doing is that if you notice in many of the cities, we have very mega plans of bringing water from, other rivers. For instance, in Rajasthan, you're bringing water from Punjab. But what we are in the process doing is that we are letting our own water go waste. So what I've been advocating is that you have to collect the on-site water, water that falls on your land. But that may not be enough. But that kind of supplements the water that you get from the larger infrastructure from Punjab and from other cities and towns. So it is important because there are times in our city, for instance, there are many days where you have zero water days because there's not enough supply, and then there are interstate disputes. And for instance, water comes from a remote dam. Now, dam gets water when it rains in that particular catchment area. Supposing it has not rained for many years, or for 1 or 2 seasons, then the dam goes dry, and because that dam was the sole supplier of water to you, you don't get water. Now, that is the time when, if you have your own local bodies, your on-site water bodies, what you can draw water from there, and you can still be, water positive. You can still have water throughout the year.
I request Dr. K. Srinivas Reddy. You may please ask your query.
Yeah, thank you, madam. Am I audible? Am I
Yes,
audible?
please go ahead. Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, it was really excellent presentation. And he took us almost to the entire Rajasthan, of course, particularly with reference to Jodhpur. Uh, Earlier, we had few visits to Jaipur area and also Rajasthan. But sir, actually, in that the Jodhpur is basically an arid area where the rainfall, annual rainfall is very, very low. I mean, I think below 500 mm annual rainfall. But here, for drinking purpose and all, I think such kind of structures which you had shown would be very useful, and also for the domestic purposes where that could be used very well by the domestic people. But concerning to the agriculture, where actually, particularly in the desert areas, rainwater harvesting is a really challenge, and uh, and to store this water and also control the evaporation rates and all, it's a really big challenge in these areas. So do you have any, some information on these things which are happening in that area?
So yes, I deliberately kept away from the uh, rural water heritage because going into that would have taken me another 40-45 minutes. Normally we do cover that also. So you have lovely examples of how water is harvested in the agricultural zones, in the farming areas and all, and they're very, very ingenious. So maybe if you want to have a dialogue, we can do that. But there you have Johar, you have Nadis, you have uh, I mean, from region to region, the name of the same water body would change, and they're so in the indigenous people are so ingenious that when rain starts coming, they build embankments, and when the depth of the water is more, they grow crops which would require water of a certain depth, and as the water recedes, then they start cultivating something where you don't require so much water. So a lot of work has been done, and I have been reading up, and I think in Madhya Pradesh they've called what pani ki kheti. They're doing a lot of work in southwest of Rajasthan. They're doing a lot of work in Aurangabad area. So a lot of work on in the agricultural sector in collecting water is going on. No water can be better than rainwater because it is there, and you can just, with the smallest of effort, you can collect it.
Thank you. Dr. Divya Agrawal, you may please ask your question.
To everyone. A very good afternoon, sir. And I am really grateful for the excellent presentation you have given us. It's very, very insightful. Sir, my question is I am from GSN Mary College, University of Delhi. So, my question is for Delhi. At times in monsoon season, it is like waterlogging, which happens in whole of the Delhi, and we are left with no available land, I would say, because of a lot of urbanization. So what should be the sustainable solution for water management for Delhi?
So we can begin by reviving the old water sources that we have, which were built in the Mughal period, and we can start multiplying those. What has happened is that during the course of last 1 century, we've kind of completely done away with these. I recently read a report where I think they are reviving Oscars, if I'm not mistaken, and they're collecting very clean water in that. So, and of course, you have the river over there, so you have one of the best sources. So in Delhi, to the best of my knowledge, it was not only rainwater, it was also river water, which is diverted into multiple water bodies. So, and it was, I think, last year that I was invited by the Jal board in Delhi to identify such water bodies, and they are onto the job of reviving these water bodies. There are many, which is many have dried up also in Delhi, around Delhi also. So I think there's a great potential even in Delhi to do the same thing. What I'm trying to say is to answer such questions, all questions that start respecting rain, start collecting that water, and you have 1,000 ways of doing it. And once you have that, I don't think water will be a big problem. Of course, extended periods of drought will have their own issues. Otherwise, water will not be a problem. In fact, there's a concentric way of doing it in the sense that you have a larger water body, then you have smaller water bodies in neighborhood, and you can have tankas within your house. So, you let no water go waste. Just collect all the flowing water and you'll have it. But of course, some efforts you'll have to make personally, some government will have to help too.
I request Mr. P. Dorje Gyamba, you may please ask your query.
For a wonderful presentation. Two things in your presentation you have shown about the stormwater water logging issue in present high intensity rainfall in different cities, particularly in Rajasthan. Here I will like to inform you that in China, one of the city Foshan, there is a concept of sponge city. sponge in sense whatsoever precipitation they are getting in that city, they are collecting from the different part of the depressed area in a particular tank, and later on they are using it for the irrigation and other different purposes. Same can be can have you thought anything about the same for Jodhpur? This is one. Secondly, you have shown lot of bawdis in Himachal. I belongs to Himachal. Himachal also we got bawdis. These are basically spring based bawdis.
Right.
This what I wanted to know, all these, whether all these bodies, you find anything, all these bodies connected with each other to maintain a particular water level, or as in Rajasthan there is a very good concept of decay system, right? We got three big reservoirs, Bakra, Satluj, Byas, this Bakra and Ravi and the Maharana Pratap Sagar. So water is coming. Whenever there is a comfortable water, there is no demand with the states of Punjab and Haryana. Then Rajasthan, in I have seen sometimes Rajasthan is using extra water. Can we see under this decay arrangement, these all body can be connected and can be recharged? Thank you, sir.
Okay. So you see, all these subsurface water bodies are connected in a manner that there are aquifers which are there in the subsurface level. Not all aquifers go to each and every well that you would dig. So if you remember, what I showed to you is that we have a lot of tanks, we have a lot of lakes, and they have pervious bases. From those pervious bases, water leaks into the aquifers, and these are the aquifers which open into the wells that they dig. So naturally, that kind of connection you would always have. You know, if you don't have water in aquifers, you will not have water in the wells. And fortunately, so far, barring, you could say after so many bawdis that I've seen, take away 2 or 3% or 5%, not all of them are dry. I mean, they still have water, so there's potential to collect water. So that is answering one question. The other is you talking Bhakra, Nangal and all these. So these would have impact only in a certain area around those. So you can't expect Bhakra, Nangal to have impact in Jaisalmer or Jodhpur or Gujarat or any other part of Rajasthan. It would have a very, very limited impact. And as far as your China issue is concerned, frankly, I don't have much knowledge about it, but the ideas that I have propounded are certainly workable, and it won't take much effort, neither at the neighborhood level or government level, to execute these. But about the sponge thing, I'm not aware of how this is done. And frankly, I'm an architect, and that's too much engineering involved. So that's like out of my course.
I request Mr. S. Shrikesh, you may please ask your query. I request Colonel Suresh Patil, you may please ask your query.
Can I Srikesh this side?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, please, please.
Yeah, see, you talked about developing newer, water harvesting system, which is almost following the traditional systems which are there in Rajasthan. Do you think it is a very cost-effective measure uh, to replicate the same way which existed in the ancient time? That is one clarification which I seek. The other one is when we consider the hydrogeological conditions, whether it is appropriate to have a surface water harvesting system, or for semi-arid and arid regions, is it appropriate to have a subsurface water harvesting system? What do you think about this? Because I'm here in this area, evapotranspiration will be very higher, nearly 7-8 months in a year. So if you are considering those aspects, there's open sources of water harvesting is a better, or subsurface better will be a better option.
So
Thank you.
the surface water harvesting is essential because that's the best way to collect water. And of course, you have a lot of evaporative losses, which will happen, but that's part of the game. It has always happened. It is always going to happen. So even, I mean, if there were no evaporative losses, then a surface water body which would actually contain water for say about 10 months or 12 months will contain for 7 months, but that's not bad. Now, this is a natural phenomenon. You cannot do much about it. So that will happen. In subsurface, you harvest water indirectly. You don't directly harvest water subsurface level because you harvest them in the aquifers. So you have to collect them somewhere, or recharge pits you have to have, recharge wells you have to have, and only then you can pass on the water into the aquifers. That is the best way. Not very popular, not very easy to do, but that's the best way to do it because then water remains secured under the earth. There are no evaporative losses. So that answers, I suppose that answers your question number 2. I'm sorry, what was your first question that you asked? Anyway.
I request Colonel Suresh Patil ji, you may please ask your query.
I think he's muted.
I request again, Colonel Suresh Patil ji, आप अपना क्वेश्चन पूछ सकते हैं.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Yes, please. Uh, I would like to put on records congratulations to Mridul for giving
Thank
us
you.
excellent presentation. But I was wondering, here, we have in non-Gangetic states, we have a huge problem of, water conservation. I mean, well, architecture is one aspect, but then primarily in Maharashtra, we have a huge problem of water conservation in a sense. Almost 85 to 90% of water goes down the drain into the ocean. So, can you suggest something for this? Of course, we as ex-servicemen, we are working here in Pune to rejuvenate Khadakwasla Dam, which provides water for Pune. But is there anything more to it, Mr. Murdul? Because your architectural part is excellent, absolutely excellent for the urban areas. But for rural, I wonder, can you suggest something, sir? Thank you. Thank you, Murdul, sir.
So, when I was presenting these case studies, so it's not like one size fits all. So you go to different regions, you will have different solutions that are already there. I mean, you need to study, you have to understand those, and you will find that there's not a corner in India where you do not have, these indigenous solutions to the water issues, the water problem. It's just that we've abandoned them. But with my knowledge, all that I can say is that when you're talking of waters that flow into into oceans, you need to do a lot of watershed programs, and you need to build check dams, etc., so that you can, flowing water you can capture over there, have it go into the earth, and you can collect for your use around the year. So this is something very broadly I'm telling you, but go to any region and you will find solutions over there. We have the best of solutions in our own backyard. We just need to reach out to those.
Mr. S. Rikesh is wanting to know, have you considered hydrogeological conditions while locating the step wells?
Well, you cannot do a well or a step well without examining the hydrogeology of the condition. So you have to do that. If you dig a well and you don't find an aquifer there, then it's going to be a dead well. So that's absolutely important to do. So now we have a lot of scientific ways of doing it. Otherwise, in the earlier times, there used to be what you call water diviners. So they would know exactly where there's a stream flowing below the earth, and they would dig a well there, and that worked very well. I mean, their hit rate was very, very high. Percentage was very high.
Dr. Rajesh Kumar requesting for water architecture for farm ponds. for structural strengthening of farm pond walls based on soil type. And also, as a lot of people, children, they die in farm ponds, is there any design which can solve these problems?
Well, that's something, which people keep asking, that when you do these water bodies, somebody might go and fall into these. Well, there have been water bodies for centuries now, so, and we have not heard of any such problem. However, to answer your specific questions, yes, there are ways. I mean, depending on the soil condition, you have to create embankments all around the pond that you have so that you can hold water. And you can make very gentle steps over there, as I've shown you in one of the pictures that we have imagined for a water body. So, you can access water without actually constructing very long steps or long flight of steps. As far as children are concerned, this is going to be an expensive thing. But firstly, you have to take care that you have very high walls around it if you just want to do that. And the other, there's a more complex way of doing a slab, a perforated slab at say just 1.5, 2 feet level of that water body. Let all the water be below that, and above that you just see, a lower depth water, a water depth of 1.5 feet, and that becomes very safe. I know it may not be very, very intelligible, very clear on when I'm verbally telling you, but it's very easy to do this. But of course, security is paramount. So the best solution and the easiest solution is doing very large, very high boundary walls around it.
This is by Rom Priyadarshini Chaudhary. In context with the current scarcity and climate change, water conservation needs to be converted to a Jan Andolan. How to make it more common with the common people? Bylaws have mandated installation of such system, but implementation and monitoring is completely lacking. How do you cope with such situation?
Well, that's something that we keep battling with, because we really want that it gets converted into a Jan Andolan. So one way of doing it is that you have to form a group which goes. I mean, for instance, I think Amir Khan, that film actor, he has a Pani Foundation in Maharashtra, and they've been doing an excellent job of bringing about awareness. And you can follow that model. What we are doing is at a small level; they are doing it at a larger level. So you have a group, you go talk to people, and actually execute projects in front of them. So when benefit starts accruing, people will get associated with you. This is what they have done. And I know about Pani Foundation. They have gone and done it in many, many villages in Maharashtra. Very successful. And you're right, Jan Andolan has to be started. And fortunately, we have a very, very, uh, you know, proactive minister. So maybe we can appeal to him to start some programs in this. I know him, so I can tell you that he would be happy to do this on his behalf.
Do you ever face any hurdle from the local community, or do you get the support while you're working or starting to take up such projects and reviving or moving on to the traditional water storages structures?
So yes and no. There are some water bodies where we do not find any problem because uh, it doesn't affect anybody. There are certain water bodies, in fact, there are many water bodies also where a lot of encroachment has taken place, where people have appropriated that. And even though it falls under state ownership, it's very difficult for them to let go. And that's where we face the maximum problem. So we try and talk to them. We tell them also that, we are not using your money. We are just getting money. We just want to revive this thing and want to clean up the place. But yes, there are problems. So I would say it's a case of, say, 30% we do have problems where encroachment over people have appropriated that, not otherwise. Otherwise, the other problem is that in many of the water bodies that we have seen, there are the local politicians who have got money, like MP lad or MLA lad. They have built something on top of these water bodies. I pointed out in one of those. So it would be very difficult to have those demolished. So many a times what we do is we play very safe. We actually start working on the main body of the thing. We work on the water of it, and something which is not having very bad impact, we don't touch that. Gradually, when the whole thing builds up, then maybe we can talk to those people and just see to it that it becomes absolutely free of encroachment. So far, none of the water bodies that we have seen done, except for Nablakha Bawri, which was a part for public park, none of these have been free of encroachment. But we are going ahead with it.
I'm curious, Mr. Love Kanoi, I'm curious to know about participatory practices in designing your architectural interventions. What, for example, is the nature of land ownership where these exciting projects have been developed? And what processes, methods do you follow to determine and integrate local community interests, aspiration for these newer structures?
Uh, so, as far as the space is concerned, you see what happens is whenever you're developing a new township, the government mandate is the bylaws are that 40% of your land is going to be open land where you can have roads and you'll have parks and there'll be some open spaces. Similarly, in neighborhoods which have already come up, the old ones, they would invariably would have open spaces. So since these open spaces are public spaces, they come under state ownership, even if it's a private township. This 40% that you have to surrender comes under state ownership. So whether you do an open water body or you do a park, I don't think anybody is going to object to that because that's, I think, well within the laws. So you can do that. As far as participatory is concerned, now this is something, I would say we are the last step well, to my reckoning, was done almost 125 years ago. After that, almost two generations have passed without seeing the impacts of these water bodies, without knowing what these water bodies are. So community participation, if they were already aware, they were conscious of it, it would have been easy. But community participation would gradually come as you start building and start showing, I mean, lead by example and start showing the impact. Your previous, the previous one who had asked a question, he had the same thing. So you have to start showing the impact. You have to start showing the way. And when, for instance, I showed you this colony, it was absolutely barren. But because of this water body, it's lush green now. Now, those are the kind of impacts, if you can show, then people will get associated. And that's the reason, I mean, it's a stunning example. There are performances happening over there, communities coming there. There are problems. I'm not saying that it's going to be without any problems. There are problems. There are problems of, who's developing, how much money is going, what is going to be where the money for maintenance is going to come. But by and large, people know the benefits and they get associated with it.
Mr. Prakash Chandra Nayak, should the earthen burns be constructed throughout the site in farm ponds? Please let me know if there is any criteria for evaporation we should consider.
See, I don't think evaporative losses can be curtailed. Those are bound to be there. And as I said, it's a natural phenomenon. So, I mean, firstly, though, you don't have water. Now, if you have water, let's, be happy with whatever we have. There will be evaporative losses. Those will go to the sky, and in some way or some other place, वापस rain की तरह आ जाएंगे. So don't worry about that. Let's be happy with however much we can collect and retain. And earthworms that you're talking of, yes, of course. The higher the earthworms you have, the greater is the capacity that you can build for storing water. Can't hear you, Anupaji.
Rest, Mridulji, there are a lot of compliments coming in. You can also glance through the chat box and you'll see there are likes, there are compliments, and people are also looking for your contact details. I think while throughout the presentation, there was email ID mentioned on the yes, on the presentation, but it will be good if you possibly can share the ID once in the chat box as well.
Yeah, and
rest, no more questions I see as of now. It's still, if somebody would like to interact or ask, you may raise your hand. We have time, we can definitely continue with the Q&A. So I think no more queries coming in.
I'm sorry, it's all right, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Another one has come up from Mr. Hemant Joshi. What would be the best technique? Kindly convey best technique to recharge groundwater in hilly areas so that the problem, water scarcity in the month of April and May can be avoided.
So I think, hello, yeah, am I audible? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So yeah, so I think again I would say watersheds can be built over there. So when what watershed does is that otherwise because of steep slopes, the water flows away rapidly and it doesn't get a chance to actually go into the earth. So if you start building a lot of watersheds, a lot of check dams over there, you'll be able to retain water which would seep into the earth and they would charge the aquifers. That's a very simple, very commonsensical way of doing it.
Any comments for dealing with the problems of the northeastern region?
Frankly, I won't know about that area. Sorry. But as I said, you'll always find them.
Yes. So with this, we have come to an end of question answer session. And I now request Dikshit ji, the senior advisor with the National Water Mission, to kindly convey your closing remarks.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Hassan Dikshit, advisor technical from the National Water Mission. The talk delivered by Shri A. Mridulji has opened a new way of approaching the water conservation work by reviving the old and dilapidated ancient water bodies and returning them to their ancient glory by the way of architectural engineering is commendable. After listening the talk, it is clear that how hard and tremendous efforts have been made by you and your team in transformation of these water bodies by contemporizing these structures. Further, the work carried out by your team is just not limited to returning the glory of water conservation sites, but it is also transforming the life of the people of that region. You rightly said that we must focus on the regional site specific indigenous water solution, and most of the solution is in our backyard. Thank you, sir, for sharing your learned experience and knowledge with us, and lack of the audience who have joined us this time and may see the recording through our social media handles in future. Finally, I would like to thanks to our viewers who have joined us through the various platforms, and I am confident that these viewers will further disseminate the information gained from this talk. I also request to all our listeners to create the awareness about the Jal Shakti Abhiyan Catch the Rain 2022 and Jal Andolan as a Jan Andolan. Thank you once again. Over to you, Anupma ji.
Thank you, Dikshit sir. Thank you, Mridulji, for your
Thank you.
presentation and wonderful talk. Thank you, all the participants, the viewers who are watching us live from Facebook, various portals, and keep supporting. You have made these water talks popular because of your participation, your active participation. Like Dikshitri has mentioned, all the previous recordings and these ones, they have found their places on the Facebook page, and also the question answers, FAQ section of National Water Mission website. It has registered all the replies there. So anytime anyone would like to refer to, you may please go back to the National Water Mission site. And ma'am has mentioned that it's almost half a century. We conducted 40th water talk today. So with your support, we'll definitely go beyond centuries as well. That's what we hope for. And let's make it bigger with your participation. Also, next month would be all festivities around October month. So hopefully we should be conducting the water talk on 21st of October. So looking forward to having your active participation, like I always say. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me over.
Thank you.